we are having a discussion right now as Mount Kenya leaders. We are proposing that we do 1 man, 1 vote, 1 shilling. We divide the revenue according to the number of people, because I feel unfairly treated when I am representing 110,000 people, given equal amount of money to another MP who is representing 5,000 people. So that is not fair. So that is why we are bringing this discussion of 1 vote, 1 man, 1 shilling, when national resources are being divided in NGCDF, in county government disbursement. Let that money be divided according to the number of people. And that discussion, we are having it, and we are not going to stop it. Whether some people want it or don't want it, that is a discussion we are going to have as Mount Kenya leaders, that the shareable revenue must be divided according to the number of people. Mount Kenya, we feel unfairly treated, not in this government, from the time immemorial. The formula of sharing revenue is not fair.
Mine is to say that the issue of 1 man, 1 vote was brought by one of our former minister and MP for Kangema, Honorable Michuki. That was around 2002, October, when he gave a lawyer, Gibson Kamau Kuria, to go to court, prosecute against the Attorney General because of the boundary delimitation that was done in 1986, whereby constituencies were not, they did not consider the numbers when they were forming the constituencies. But now one thing I understand is that when they got to government, Kebake was the president, Michuki was there, they were not able to implement this issue of 1 man, 1 vote. They have been trying. In 2012, Uhuru got in, and Uhuru was one of the supporters of 1 man, 1 vote. He tried to implement it, it was not practical. It was not possible, because even at the tail end, that's when Michuki Uhuru brought the issue of 1 man, 1 vote. But as a parliament, we have now have a system whereby the constituency money is divided according to the wards, and that's a better approach. And I wish even at the Commission of Revenue Division, I wish we can try to see how we can be able to gauge on how we can divide money according to the numbers at the counties. Because if we go the 1 man, 1 shilling, 1 vote, that route, unless we are able to bring all the communities together, we agree on one formula.
The 2 MPs that have spoken about the 1 man, 1 shilling, 1 vote is Madera MP Eric Wamumbe and his Kangema counterpart, Peter Kehungi, if I'm not wrong. And I decided to veer off from the Rigathi Gachagua speech because I tend to realize that the better way then to discuss and relook at that 1 man, 1 shilling debate objectively is to remove Rigathi Gachagua in that discussion. The narrative political tempers flaring high over the contentious 1 man, 1 shilling debate in the country is a counter strategy by those against that discussion. But I'm one person that I'm a strong believer that the areas that are highly populated should be considered better than the areas where population is low. Or rather, to make it more simple, amongst the other variables that are being considered on revenue allocation, both to counties and the constituencies, the issue of the population should not be left behind. And in fact, it should come number 1 or number 2. So that is what that MP is saying. That is the typical explanation that Wanjiku needs to understand. In my constituency of Alenga Usonga, I like using it because I'm lobbying for it also to be divided, is that we have a population that votes for the MP is in the tune of 70,000. You have areas in Baringo like in Tiati that are full, kids don't even go to school. The schools are deserted because of terrorism. Or maybe I'm using a wrong example. Let's go to Garissa, where even the turnout, the number of schools, the hospitals and infrastructures in those counties are a bit low. So much as money is supposed to help develop the counties, but that money is also supposed to help in service delivery. So when the population is high, the demand for services is relatively high. That is why I have been standing with the debate that those that are highly populated, the money that they're getting should be also slightly commensurate to the population. And that is not to mean that what the framers of devolution envisioned, that areas that are also marginalized, the devolution was coming to decentralize resources so that they can also be uplifted. But then 14 years after devolution, what is so wrong with us rethinking the formula? And so I've listened to two leaders that have spoken, their reaction towards this. But I find their reaction a bit shallow and just a counter strategy by those against this debate.
Sijui Mount Kenya, sijui 1 shilling, 1 vote. Inaleta ukabila, inaleta hamasa. It potentially can derail the development agenda ya serikali. Na sisi hatuna shida na mtu, lakini hata sisi pia tuko pale kuzungumzia hao wengine. Na tutaki uhasama na mtu. Iko shida gani? Leo ule mtu wa Lamu ambaye ametengwa kwa muda yote, leo amepewa zaidi kidogo ili waendeleze jamii yao. Iko shida gani? Inaitwa social justice. To make those who are worse off better off before those who become better off become well off. Inajulikana, positive discrimination is allowed in the constitution. Kama vile unainua kina mama na vijana, unaweza kuinua watu ambao wametengwa. There is no discrimination in that. Hakuna ubaguzi katika hiyo. Na mimi nikiwaambia tushirikiane, mimi nikamwambia ndio tukae hapa ndani ya hii serikali kama inawezekana. Sisi kama jamii ndogo, kama watu tuliotengwa kwa muda mrefu, kama zile counties zinaitwa marginalized categories, kama zile constituency ambazo ziko na idadi ya watu wachache, sisi tunasema Kenya iwe Kenya moja. Hii mambo ya sijui 1 shilling, 1 vote, 1 man, wachana nayo.
Poverty index. This is a good debate to engage in, but engage in it from a point of knowledge and use empirical data, not emotions. I told you, just like I said during the Linturi impeachment motion, I like to base my decisions on facts, data, not emotions, not perceptions.
One is Yala Member of Parliament Hassan Omar and the majority leader in the National Assembly, Kimani Ichun'gwa. And if you listen to them, they are saying this bill is going to be divisive. I don't buy the angle of being divisive because my position is clear. There is a way we can have this debate that is not a Mount Kenya issue. If we are going to settle on a formula as a country, that formula is not going to be applied only to Mount Kenya counties. That formula is going to be applied across the other counties and the constituencies. It will be a uniform formula. And so that is why I don't buy that narrative. There are those who have said, and I just saw a tweet I want to read for you. It is a tweet by one of the UDA bloggers that have been unleashed to talk down this discussion. Bianca is saying, I agree with the Yala MP 100%. Imagine you have the best schools, best hospitals, 90% access to clean water, and almost 79% tarmac roads. The poverty level is low in your region, but you want to continue the marginalization of other regions where poverty, illiteracy, and diseases are high by starting a controversial, emotive, and divisive narrative called 1 man, 1 vote, 1 shilling. Why can't we allow the allocation of more resources to go to these marginalized regions and develop them to the same level as ours before we start talking about 1 man, 1 shilling, 1 vote? But what Bianca and the team must also remember, that the counties we are saying marginalized, that are going to be disadvantaged if this formula is relooked, these counties also receive equalization fund. And the parameters of disbursing the equalization fund is on the poverty index of these counties. So it is not true that these counties are not really looked into. I think that narrative needs to be debunked. And the second narrative that also has to be debunked in this is that when you look at a formula, then there are areas that Mount Kenya is going to benefit more than other areas. My only point of departure, I agree and I take clear point that population should be a key parameter, so that where people are densely populated, they should be considered in terms of allocation. And I've used the best one is CDF. The areas where kids don't even go to school and the schools are even closed, some hospitals are even shut. But then there are areas that are a bit vibrant, like even the urban towns. So do you know that even contrary to what they are saying, or contrary to what is being said, it is not true that all Mount Kenya counties are going to benefit immensely to the disadvantage of others. Because if you're going to use the population as a parameter, do you know that the county of Kakamega is more populated than Nyeri? And do you know that the county of Machakos is more populated than Nyeri? So it is not true that really only Mount Kenya is going to benefit. I hope this discussion should be taken a notch higher. And let's just keep off what Rigathi said, because Rigathi is the second in command, and Rigathi is saying it as a context, at a context. I need to say, tell Mount Kenya, the debate about this cannot continue well if the Rigathi Gachagua is the driver. Because Rigathi Gachagua does not carry the right motive with it. He is saying it because he is angry with his boss. And I'm going to look at that toward the end of this podcast. Now, how about if we listen to what Mutahi Kahiga said when recently the CEREB, which is the regional block of Mount Kenya's governors, when they met the CRA, the Commission on Revenue Allocation, and he had a proposal on what he thinks should be considered.
First and foremost, we have 47 counties. It's pointless to start speaking about sharing if any of those counties are not working. We must make sure, sit here and ask ourselves, for one county to be working in Kenya today, what is the minimum we must give every county across this country, regardless of whether Lamu has 110,000 people, Nyeri has 1 million, Kakamega has 2, Kiambu has 3. Because as far as I'm concerned, I'm a Kenyan. Yes. And if Kenya will develop, let us stop. You know, we are still working around the colonial mentalism. Can we ensure that we sit down as CRA and say, and I'm giving you, I have been a governor twice. The minimum you need for any county to be operational is 7 billion. Where can you take that one? And even if you give 7 and don't give anything else, let them go and everybody will survive. So let's review that. What is the basic share for every county to be operational? Because CRA, in terms of equity and thinking about the future cake, must also incentivize those that are producing. Why are you not looking at that? If you want a bigger cake next year, we are only saying, so if you reduce Muranga's ability to produce coffee, Muranga's ability to produce avocado, what will happen to our GDP the year after? Those are questions we must ask. I may ask you just for a reason, because Kenya has a tendency of saying the central region has always been favored. Do you know how many people have jiggers in this region? Do you know how many of us are living in slums? Do you know how many of us are suffering? Do you know how many of us cannot access Medicare? Yet pale. This is a notion that has been created that is not correct, is not true. That because we have had successful presidents, I don't know which president came when, another one came when, and we are not, that is not true. Now, for ourselves as Central or CEREB, I have said the pain we have is not getting what we deserve. And since we agreed, we become very frank and talk to each other. From the first formula, it was about how do we take away from Central to other places. That was number one. We came to the second one. Some people tried to contone and say, oh, now let's change it a little. They did. Even let us forget these kind of things. Injustices are injustices, it doesn't matter done to whom. We all agree that the Northeastern requires tarmac. We also agree that Kajiado must have, even if you went to Amboseli, they also need tarmac. As we think about it, let us equip our counties. A county like Tharaka Nithi, a county like Kirinyaga, where my chair comes from, Embu here, look at the amounts of money they are getting. Nyeri too, we are, I think, we are now at 6.1. One of the things I would want the CRA to ask themselves this question. You talk a lot about, oh, you want to incentivize, I don't know whom to do what, increase revenue. Have you ever asked yourself this question? Who bakes the cake? Because once we ask ourselves that question, as commissioners, as governors, as Kenyans, then we will not give someone a knife and another one a panga to go and eat the cake, because it's already telling us that one is advantaged, the other one is. And so we must start with the key. Now that we are here, we want to discuss, you have listened to others, can we look for the knife that we shall give everybody, an equal knife, the same size, to cut the cake? If we do not do that, then let us ask ourselves, who brought the flour, who brought the eggs, who did the baking? But we can't wake up one morning when the cake is ready, all of us now come and start saying, let us start by having it equally. Where were you when we were baking it? We must ask. Have you asked yourself that question? When I look at your formula, whether the first, the second, or the third, it doesn't appear.
In his considered opinion in that video, that Mutahi Kahiga is saying that what we should actually consider, very important, is we should also give incentives to some very good contributors. We should maximize, we should also maximize on the counties that are contributing. That is very arguable. But then, the most important thing here, we can get an average. He's saying 7 billion every county can work. Because if you look at the structure, every county can work at 7 billion. Probably that is possible. And then we go to the second tier and look at population, a relative, so that we do commensurate to what the population is. I don't know what is just wrong with that. But I'll be so brutal and truthful for those who are opposed to this. They are also not objective about it. Even where William Ruto is seated, he knows very well that we can crack, the country can crack the numbers. That everybody at the end of the day can go home smiling without the complaint that he or she has been discriminated. But then this has been turned into something else. It has been turned into a political tool because it is Rigathi Gachagua speaking about it. And so let me say, this Ruto strategy to counter the Rigathi started debate is because the Kimani Ichun'gwa and the team feel that if the Rigathi Gachagua is the driver of that narrative, then he's endearing himself to the voters. Remember, as we speak, Rigathi is not in good terms and he has struggled a number of things to endear himself to Mount Kenya. Even the recent contentious fight against the substance and alcohol abuse is one of the key tools that Rigathi has picked so that he can endear himself to the mothers in Mount Kenya. The other role he was playing on agriculture reforms in Mount Kenya, coffee and tea subsector reforms, was also another one that he was targeting to try to endear himself as a man fighting for the region. And so the Kimani Ichun'gwa and the team understands very well that this is something that Rigathi is doing to endear himself, and then Rigathi is going to eclipse them in the race to be the kingpin. But I think that is a bit myopic. When you listen to the first MP, the video that I played to you here, that MP from Kangema is saying that this thing started way back in 1986, and even the 2002 when Kenyan were in government, they realized the problem that this country had is the initial demarcation of constituencies did not consider the population as part of it. So it is a problem that started back then in the days. And even when Uhuru Kenyatta was in government, in his second term, he tried to do something about it, although his diagnosis was additional constituencies so that the money that will be getting to those constituencies through CDF will be doubled. But that was watered down by petty politics, by the fellows that are now criticizing it. Now, Ruto also understands that the DP is supporting this as a provocation tool, but is not in for it, and I support that. The DP is not in for the one man, one shilling, one vote for the sake of it. He's only in it as a provocation tool because he knows that William Ruto is not gonna support it. And lastly, they are opposing it because Karua and Kioni camp, who are now charging by the use of that Limuru 3, will pick up this discussion. And the more it gains currency, then they are going to get their way in Mount Kenya. And so much is to be said and more to be done. But I don't just believe we should trash it off because it is regarding speaking about it. How about the country becoming objective, then following this discussion and picking, are there some good lessons that we need to pick? Or is it time to look at that formula? That is my point.